You want a piece of me? Fine! Oh, don't you all look scary? Okay, here's some for little Optimus Prime, and there's Tinkerbell, and there's the Power Ranger. Okay, now you guys be safe, okay? Okay, bye. Well, hello again, and happy Halloween. This is Victor with the Junkyard. Now, tonight I'd like to talk about I Am Legend.
Now, while I will talk about the 2007 movie, I'm actually talking about the book by Richard Matheson and the movies it inspired. This review will contain book and movie spoilers, so be warned. The book is basically about the last survivor of a vampire plague, a man named Robert Neville, trying to stave off madness and despair as he hunts down and kills the vampires in his area. The book comes into focus when he discovers a survivor, who he realizes is just one of a sizable population of civilized vampires. The vampires had evolved to regain intelligence, he discovers, and that his quest to destroy them had made him their boogeyman. He thus, somewhat willingly, sacrifices himself to allow this new society to move on. Now, the clips I used to describe this come from Last Man on Earth, an underappreciated gem starring Vincent Price. It was the first, most book-accurate, and in my opinion best adaptation of Matheson's novel. The difference between the book and movie here were almost negligible, and didn't affect the plot much at all. One thing it did, that most of the other adaptations would also have, is an increased focus on the hero's search for a cure. In the book he never found one. In most of the films he did. Now, in the movie, as well as in the book, these vampires were slow-moving and stupid, functioning on only a basic level, with only disjointed and disconnected memories.
And that brings us to our next adaptation, which for a few of you may be a surprise.
But really, does this scene look kind of familiar to you? Mindless creatures attacking a house in huge numbers, moving jerkily and groaning? Yep, George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. While not a straight adaptation, Romero took several elements of I Am Legend for his film. Thus you get a survival horror film that would in time inspire an entire subgenre of horror films, the zombie flick.
And that is perhaps the most interesting thing about it. Zombies, in their traditional meaning, are simply people or corpses that are controlled by a voodoo priest or hungan.
But in popular culture, zombies are generally of the Romero type. And Romero's zombies are just a flesh-eating version of Matheson's blood-sucking vampires. So for all intents and purposes, most of what we call zombies are actually Matheson's slow vampires. Don't know if Anne Rice could have made these guys sexy. Next up is Omega Man, a 1971 adaptation starring Charlton Heston and Anthony Zerbe. This one frankly has less to do with I Am Legend than any of the previous incarnations. The idea that the vampires could evolve a civilization only came in at the end of the book in Last Man, and was completely ignored in Night of the Living Dead. But in Omega Man, they're civilized from the beginning. In fact, they might only be classified as vampires because of their aversion to sunlight. Really, they've just become cultists. And since they're intelligent enough to get around locked doors, this Neville has to take a, different approach. Never could have seen this one coming, huh? Anyway, this was a fun bit of unsubtle social commentary, but it wasn't much of an I Am Legend adaptation. Now on to I Am Legend, the 2007 Will Smith movie. Early on, after seeing the film, someone made a good point. Last Man on Earth is really a near-perfect adaptation, so just remaking the film again, even if it was made more book-accurate, would be redundant. So I try to be forgiving of the film's derivations from the plot, which are numerous. But frankly, no. This is another Will Smith film that should have just been its own movie instead of taking a respected name and mucking it up. First of all, Will's Neville isn't alone. Maybe he's the last man on Earth, but he's still got his trusted canine friend who allows him to still have dialogue, however one-sided. It's a clever way of keeping things interesting, but it completely undermines the book's desperate isolation. Another problem is the antagonists. fact is, I don't know what to call these guys. They're like rage-infected vampire acrobats. Needless to say, you can't just hole up in a house and eat your dinner while these guys attack, so we have to watch under the belief that Smith's character managed to hide from these guys for years. All things considered, however, the film was pretty good. Up until the end. That's where these two suddenly show up and the film turns into M. Night Shyamalan's Signs. Suddenly we're talking about whether or not there's a god and whether God has a plan, and as they're surrounded by flesh-eating monsters...
What a twist!
And what's worse, this ending is... well, it's like the movie makers forgot what movie they were doing near the end. They set up the whole evolving civilization thing throughout the movie with Alpha Male trying so desperately to get his mate back from Neville. But then, instead of taking it down that route, the concept is thrown out completely in favor of making things go all splody. But to add insult to injury, this wasn't their only option for the ending. They had filmed and digitally rendered all the effects in a scene where Neville did realize that the mutants were evolving some of their humanity back, and that he was their monster. A clip from this ending was used in the trailer, for God's sake. Why didn't they use it? Fuck if I know. I guess it's because he lived at the end of this one, and there was no other way to write that without throwing the message completely out the window, which they did. So they chose dark and meaningless over optimistic and meaningful. Thanks again, Hollywood, for the comedic attempt to avoid a Hollywood ending in a distinctly Hollywood fashion.
Well, there you go. I Am Legend and all of its bastard offspring. Go watch Last Man on Earth on Google Video if you happen to get the chance, but in any case, have a happy and spooky Halloween. Meanwhile, I'm gonna go get some candy. Freaks. All of you. Freaks. But I'm a man. The last man. They were afraid of me. Afraid of me.